You know, it's a strange thing. People often say they want peace, inner peace, world peace, peace of mind, but the truth is, peace is terrifying to those who have not yet faced themselves. When you become calm, grounded, and unshakably centered, you hold up a mirror to everyone who's still at war within their own mind, and they don't like what they see. See, peace isn't passive, it's power restrained. It's strength under control. It's the kind of quiet confidence that unsettles people who rely on chaos to feel alive. When you stop reacting, they lose control. When you don't argue, they lose direction. When you're not triggered, they're exposed. So when people can't stand your peace, it's not your peace that's the problem. It's their inability to find their own. And that's what we're going to explore today, why your calm threatens their chaos, and why your stillness is the loudest thing in the room. Would you like me to continue with a Jordan Peterson style body section around 500 words that explains why peace provokes people who live in internal conflict? When you begin to cultivate peace within yourself, something remarkable happens and something uncomfortable begins to happen in others. Your inner calm becomes a mirror reflecting the turbulence they've been avoiding. Most people live in a state of quiet chaos. Their thoughts race, their emotions pull them in conflicting directions, and their sense of identity depends on the reactions and opinions of others. They mistake noise for meaning, conflict for connection, and drama for aliveness. When someone walks into that environment grounded, composed, and unbothered, it unsettles them deeply because your peace highlights what they lack. Peace, you see, is not merely the absence of conflict. It is the presence of clarity. When you've done the hard inner work, when you've faced your pain, confronted your fears, and stopped running from your shadow, you radiate a quiet power. That power cannot be faked. It cannot be borrowed. It comes only from self, understanding, and the discipline to remain stable when everything else tries to pull you off center. People who have not done that work will feel your stability as judgment, even if you never say a word. It's not that you think you're better, it's that your mere existence reminds them of what they could be but haven't yet become. This is why they often try to provoke you. They'll test your boundaries, question your calm, and even label it as arrogance or indifference. What they're really doing is projecting their own discomfort. Your lack of chaos removes their ability to control the emotional tone of an interaction. In a world built on reaction, your stillness is rebellion. It says, "I will not participate in your storm." That declaration, whether spoken or silently lived, forces people to confront the truth. That peace is possible, but it requires accountability. And accountability is painful for those still avoiding themselves. When you're peaceful, you're no longer playing their game. You don't chase validation. You don't argue to win. You don't seek to be understood by those committed to misunderstanding you. This deprives them of the familiar cycle, the emotional ping-pong of chaos that keeps them feeling important. So your peace doesn't just expose their inner chaos, it dismantles the system they use to sustain it. And here's the irony. Deep down, they admire what you've achieved. They want that same steadiness. But admiration, when mixed with envy and insecurity, quickly turns into resentment. They can't stand your peace because it forces a reckoning within themselves, a realization that they, too, could be free if they were willing to let go of their own chaos. But letting go means facing pain, responsibility, and change things many are simply not ready to confront. So when your peace disturbs others, don't take it as rejection, take it as confirmation. You've stepped into a higher frequency, one that some can't yet handle. And that's not your burden to carry. It's your sign that you're evolving. When a person achieves true calm, it changes the entire dynamic of human interaction. Calm energy carries authority, not the loud, dominating kind that demands attention, but the quiet, grounded kind that cannot be manipulated. People who rely on emotional chaos to maintain control feel powerless in the presence of such composure. They are used to influencing others through anger, guilt, or fear. They know how to pull emotional strings, how to provoke a reaction, how to keep others off balance. But when you stay calm, when you refuse to be drawn into their emotional games, you remove their leverage. Their control begins to crumble, and that's why your calm unsettles them so deeply. Manipulative individuals thrive in environments charged with emotion. They need noise to hide their intentions, confusion to disguise their motives, and reaction to feel powerful. The moment you stop reacting, you become unpredictable, and to them, unpredictability equals danger. Your calm forces them into unfamiliar territory, where they can no longer dictate the pace or tone of the interaction. They can shout, accuse, or dramatize, but if you remain steady, their tactics lose effectiveness. They start to see that the emotional strings they once pulled no longer reach you. This is the essence of true strength, the ability to maintain control over your inner state when others attempt to disturb it. Calmness, in this sense, is not weakness, it's discipline. It's the result of emotional maturity and the refusal to give away your peace for the sake of temporary validation. People who depend on manipulation interpret this as resistance, even defiance. In truth, it is simply self-respect. Your calm energy sets a boundary that says, "You no longer have access to my emotions as a tool for your control." What's fascinating is how predictable their response becomes. The more calm you remain, the more desperate they become to regain dominance. They might escalate their behavior, use guilt trips, or play the victim, anything to get you reactive again. But each time you stay composed, you teach them a silent lesson. Control over others is an illusion. Control over oneself is real power. Eventually, they're forced to confront the truth that their influence ends where your self-awareness begins. Calm energy also has a ripple effect. It doesn't just protect you, it begins to transform the atmosphere around you. People who operate with integrity will find your presence reassuring. Those who operate from manipulation will find it threatening. Your calm becomes a filter, revealing intentions that once hid beneath charm or aggression. It separates those who genuinely connect from those who only seek control. So when you notice that your calm disturbs certain people, understand that it's not about you being too quiet or too detached. It's about them losing the ability to manipulate your emotions for their benefit. Your calm is a declaration of independence, a refusal to be controlled by chaos. And once you master that, no manipulator can truly stand against you, because they can't stand before someone who doesn't play their game. Silence is one of the most powerful forms of communication, yet it is also one of the most misunderstood. For people who are deeply insecure, silence feels unbearable. They interpret it not as peace, but as judgment, as though your quiet is highlighting their inadequacy. In reality, your silence isn't about them at all. It's about restraint, self-control, and understanding that not every battle deserves your energy. But for those who thrive on validation or attention, your decision to remain silent disrupts the very system they rely on to feel significant. They need noise to stay relevant, and your calm quietness exposes the emptiness behind their noise. When you remain silent in moments where others expect a reaction, whether it's an argument, gossip, or provocation, you take away their ability to define the interaction. Insecure people depend on feedback to confirm their worth. They talk endlessly, defend themselves excessively, and seek constant reassurance that they matter. Your silence breaks that cycle. It leaves them alone with their thoughts, and that's something they've been avoiding for a long time. Because when the noise stops, the truth becomes audible, the truth about their fears, their doubts, and the void they've been trying to fill with attention. Silence also carries strength because it cannot be manipulated. Words can be twisted, arguments can be distorted, but silence stands untouchable. When you choose silence over reaction, you send a message far louder than anger ever could. I am not obligated to explain my peace. Insecure people can't handle that. They interpret your quiet as superiority, even though it's actually self-protection. They begin to project their own discomfort onto you, assuming you're judging them, ignoring them, or looking down on them when in reality, you're simply choosing not to engage with their chaos. This misinterpretation often leads to resentment. They'll try to provoke you into speaking, to defend, to justify anything to pull you back into the emotional noise where they feel more comfortable. But each time you respond with silence, you reaffirm your control over yourself. You remind them that emotional stability doesn't need to shout to be understood. Your silence is not passive, it's powerful. It demands that others rise to your level of composure if they want to communicate meaningfully. It's also important to understand that silence is a mirror. Whatever is inside, a person gets reflected back at them when no words are exchanged. The secure person will feel calm in your quiet. The insecure one will feel exposed. Silence reveals character. It separates those who find peace in stillness from those who find fear in it. And that's why insecure individuals can't stand it, because when you stop speaking, they can no longer hide from themselves. So when your silence provokes discomfort, don't rush to fill the space. Let it breathe. Let them confront the unease that lives inside them. Your silence is not rejection, it's an invitation for others to meet you in maturity. And if they can't, that's not your loss. It's their lesson waiting to be learned. Self-mastery is one of the most intimidating qualities a person can possess, especially to those whose sense of control depends on the weakness of others. When you master yourself, your emotions, your reactions, your impulses, you remove the very tools that fragile egos use to manipulate or define you. Weak egos survive on comparison. They need to feel above someone to feel worthy at all. When you no longer compete, when you no longer seek validation, and when you operate from self-discipline rather than approval, they lose their power source. Your self-mastery becomes a silent challenge to everything they believe about themselves. Most people are reactive. They respond to life emotionally, impulsively, and without awareness. They let their mood dictate their decisions. But self-mastery requires awareness, the ability to step back from the emotion and act from clarity, not chaos. That level of control threatens people who are ruled by their feelings. To them, your composure looks unnatural, maybe even cold. They can't understand how you stay unshaken while they're drowning in emotion. Instead of admiring your strength, they often resent it, because your stability reminds them of how unstable they truly are. A weak ego thrives on emotional control over others. It seeks to provoke a reaction, anger, defensiveness, guilt, because that reaction provides proof of influence. When you master yourself, those buttons no longer work. You no longer give them the emotional currency they depend on. They might insult you, misjudge you, or try to trigger you, but you remain unmoved. That calm disarms them completely, and the more they push, the more powerless they feel. Eventually, your stillness becomes unbearable because it forces them to face the truth. They never had power over you, only power over your reactions. Self-mastery also dismantles their illusions. Weak egos often build identity around dominance, around being louder, stronger, or more assertive. But self-mastery introduces a different kind of power, one that doesn't need to prove itself. It's quiet, deliberate, and deeply rooted. It doesn't seek to be noticed, it simply is, and that terrifies those who live for external validation. They can't compete with authenticity because it exposes the fragility of their false confidence. When you reach a point of true self-mastery, you stop engaging in meaningless conflicts. You choose peace over being right, growth over ego, presence over performance. This withdrawal from drama is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's understanding that control over self is infinitely more valuable than control over others. And this realization threatens people who depend on chaos to feel significant, because your peace reveals that significance doesn't come from domination, but from discipline. So when your self-mastery makes others uncomfortable, remember it's not because you're doing something wrong. It's because you've become something they can't easily manipulate. You've stepped beyond their game, and they can't follow you there. Weak egos crave attention, strong minds create distance. Your mastery isn't arrogance, it's evolution. And evolution always unsettles those who choose to remain unchanged. Boundaries are one of the clearest expressions of self-respect, yet they are often perceived as acts of defiance by those who have benefited from your lack of them. When you begin to set firm boundaries, you disrupt the unspoken arrangements that allowed others to take advantage of your openness, your kindness, or your need to be liked. People who have grown comfortable crossing your limits will interpret your new strength as hostility, not because you've become cruel, but because their comfort relied on your compliance. Your clarity threatens the imbalance they once controlled. Boundaries are not walls, they are filters. They don't block people out, they decide what and who is worthy of access to your peace. But to those who depend on manipulating your emotions, your energy, or your time, a filter feels like rejection. When you no longer overextend yourself to please them, They feel deprived of something they were never entitled to. This is why setting boundaries often triggers anger, guilt, tripping, or emotional withdrawal from others. They will call you selfish, changed, or distant, not because your boundaries are wrong, but because your self-awareness exposes their entitlement. The truth is, boundaries make relationships healthier, not weaker. But insecure or controlling people see them as barriers because they equate closeness with access. To them, love means permission to vent, to overstep, to control, or to depend on you excessively. When you begin to say no, they hear you don't care. That distortion comes from their inability to separate love from control. Your boundaries teach them a painful but necessary truth, that your compassion has limits, and your peace is not up for negotiation. In the process of establishing boundaries, you might notice that the people who truly value you will respect your limits, even if it takes them time to adjust. But those who only valued what they could take from you will resist, manipulate, or walk away. This revelation is difficult but freeing. It shows you who was with you for genuine connection and who was there for convenience. And this clarity, this emotional honesty, is precisely what many people fear, because it ends the illusion of one-sided relationships. Setting boundaries also changes the way you carry yourself. You stop explaining your worth, you stop apologizing for taking space, and you stop trying to fix those who refuse to take responsibility for themselves. Your energy becomes intentional, your presence selective, and your interactions rooted in mutual respect. To those who fed on your confusion or your people-pleasing tendencies, this new version of you feels unrecognizable and therefore threatening. But boundaries are not cruelty. They are a declaration: I am responsible for my peace, not your comfort. They remind both you and others that love without respect is manipulation, and giving without limits leads to resentment. So when your boundaries disturb someone, don't soften them to make others comfortable. The right people won't be disturbed, they'll be inspired. Because anyone who truly values you will never fear your boundaries. They'll understand they are the proof of your growth. When you begin to grow, truly grow, it unsettles people who have remained the same. Your evolution becomes a silent confrontation for them, a reminder that change is possible but requires courage, humility, and discomfort. Most people avoid that kind of transformation. They prefer familiarity, even if it keeps them stuck. So when you begin to evolve emotionally, mentally, spiritually, your very presence challenges the narratives they've built to justify their stagnation. They start to feel exposed, not because you are judging them, but because your growth reflects the choices they haven't made. Growth forces people to confront themselves. It exposes what they've neglected, the dreams they've buried, the fears they've avoided, the potential they've denied. When they see you setting boundaries, healing, or pursuing purpose, they are faced with an uncomfortable truth. They could do it too, but they haven't. This realization can breed resentment, envy, or passive resistance. They may mock your progress, minimize your efforts, or label you as different, distant, or fake. But what they're really saying is, your change reminds me of what I've refused to change. Your growth disrupts the dynamics that kept certain relationships intact. Many connections are built not on mutual respect, but on shared wounds, shared complaints, or shared dysfunction. When you start healing, you break that bond. You no longer engage in gossip, victimhood, or emotional dependency. To people still living in that mindset, your growth feels like betrayal. They'll say you've changed, and they'll be right. You've changed the terms of connection. You no longer bond through pain, you bond through purpose. What they don't understand is that growth isn't about superiority, it's about responsibility. It's about taking ownership of your mind, your emotions, and your direction. It means confronting your own flaws instead of blaming the world for them. That kind of accountability is intimidating because it demands maturity. People who are still avoiding themselves see your progress as pressure. It forces them to ask questions they don't want answered. Why am I still here? Why haven't I done more? What am I afraid of? Your growth becomes their mirror, and not everyone is ready to look into it. In truth, your evolution isn't meant to make others comfortable. It's meant to make you whole. The right people will celebrate it because they're growing too. The wrong ones will resist it because it threatens the equilibrium that kept them comfortable in your old version. And sometimes, The hardest part of growth isn't what you gain, it's what you outgrow. You'll lose people, habits, and environments that no longer align with your higher path, but that's not loss, it's refinement. So when others can't stand your growth, don't shrink to ease their discomfort. Let them face themselves as you once did. Growth is not an act of defiance, it's an act of truth. And truth, by its very nature, shakes everything that's built on illusion. Your evolution doesn't insult them, it invites them if they're brave enough to evolve too.